My name is Scarlett. I'm 43 years old. Last night, my mom left me a voicemail that said only 5 words, "Don't come back." By morning, my phone showed 46 missed calls from the same woman who told me to stay away. I didn't know yet what she was afraid of, or what I had uncovered that scared her so badly. Tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe for more family drama and emotional courage stories. I was standing in the grocery store parking lot when my phone buzzed. One vibration, then silence. I almost ignored it. I was tired. My back hurt. My mind was already full. But something made me stop halfway between the cart return and my car. I leaned against the door, pressed play, and held the phone to my ear. "Scarlett," my mother said. Her voice was flat. Not angry. Not crying. Just empty. A short pause followed, like she was deciding whether to finish the thought. Then she said, "Don't come back." That was it. No explanation. No goodbye. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, waiting for more. Another sentence. A correction. Anything. But the screen stayed dark, reflecting my face back at me. Pale. Confused. Frozen in a way I hadn't felt since I was a child. People walked past me with bags of groceries. A man laughed into his phone. A woman struggled to get her toddler into a car seat. Normal life moved forward, while mine stopped cold in a parking lot that smelled like asphalt and warm bread. My mother and I argued. We always had. But she had never told me not to come home. That word, home, had always been hers to offer and mine to return to, no matter how bad things got. Until now. I sat in the driver's seat without turning the key. I replayed the voicemail again. Then again. I listened for emotion between the words. A tremble. A crack. Something human. There was nothing. It sounded rehearsed, like she had practiced saying it without shaking. My chest tightened. My first thought wasn't anger. It was fear. Because my mother didn't shut people out unless she was hiding something. As I drove, memories rose up without asking permission. Not dramatic ones. Small, ordinary moments. My mom standing at the sink late at night, washing the same plate twice. Her habit of lowering her voice whenever I entered the room. The way she changed the subject when I asked questions about the past. I had brushed those things off for years. Families are weird, I used to tell myself. Nobody's perfect. But the voicemail changed the shape of everything that came before it. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the couch with my coat still on and let the quiet wrap around me. I stared at the wall where a picture frame used to hang before my divorce. That empty square of lighter paint always caught my eye, like a reminder of something removed but never replaced. I tried calling her back, straight to voicemail. I typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Nothing I wrote sounded right. How do you respond to being told not to exist in someone's space anymore? Instead, I made tea I didn't drink. I paced from room to room. I checked my phone every few minutes like it might suddenly explain itself. That night, sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it wasn't kind. I dreamed of my childhood home. Same hallway, same creaky step near the bathroom, but every door was locked. I walked from room to room calling my mother's name, and no one answered. When I woke up, my heart was racing, and my pillow was damp. I checked my phone again. Nothing. The next morning, I replayed the voicemail one more time, forcing myself to listen like a stranger would. The words were calm, controlled, but there was something underneath them. Pressure, like a lid being held down too tightly. I decided to drive past the house. Not to go in, just to see it, to remind myself it was still there. The street looked the same. Neatly trimmed lawns, flags hanging from porches, a neighbor sweeping leaves like it was any other weekday. My mother's car sat in the driveway, curtains drawn, lights off. I didn't stop. I kept driving. On the way back, my phone rang. My sister's name flashed on the screen. I answered on the second ring. "What did you say to her?" she asked without greeting. I didn't say anything. I replied. She left me a voicemail. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, uneven and quick. "She's upset," my sister said carefully. "That's not new." "She didn't mean it," she added, too fast. I pulled over. "Then why say it?" Silence again. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that tells you someone is choosing their words like stepping stones over deep water. "You need to give her space," my sister finally said. "I've been giving her space my whole life," I answered, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. She hung up soon after, claiming she had to get back to work. But her tone stayed with me. Defensive. Nervous. Like she knew more than she was letting on. That afternoon, I tried distracting myself. I cleaned out a drawer that hadn't been opened in years. Old receipts. A broken watch. A birthday card from my mom with a message that read, "Love you no matter what." I laughed out loud at that. Not because it was funny, because it hurt. By evening, the voicemail had replayed itself in my head so many times that it felt carved into me. I could hear it while washing dishes, while brushing my teeth, while staring at the ceiling in bed. I wondered what I had done wrong this time. Asked the wrong question. Looked too closely at something I wasn't supposed to see. I thought back to the week before, to the box I found while helping her clean out the garage. Papers that didn't match the story I'd been told growing up. Dates that didn't line up. Names I didn't recognize. I hadn't accused her. I had just asked. Her face had changed then. Just for a second. Enough to notice. Not guilt. Fear. The voicemail made sense in that light. Fear makes people say harsh things. Fear makes them push before they're pushed. That night, my phone stayed quiet. No follow-up. No apology. Just that one message sitting there like a closed door. I didn't know yet how far the silence would stretch. I didn't know how many calls would come later. I only knew that something fragile had finally broken, and whatever my mother was protecting, she was willing to lose me to keep it hidden. And that realization settled into my chest heavier than anger ever could. I stared at the empty voicemail again, letting the silence settle around me like a weight. It was the kind of quiet that invites you to think about things you'd rather not. And that's when my eyes drifted to the corner of the living room where I had stacked a few boxes from last month's attempt at decluttering. I hadn't planned to look inside, but something, a sudden impulse I couldn't explain, drew me toward the smallest cardboard box, the one tucked behind the larger ones like it had a reason for hiding. The tape on the box was old, frayed at the edges. I pulled it open carefully, as though it might snap under my touch, releasing something I wasn't ready to handle. Inside were papers I didn't recognize immediately, old letters, receipts, legal documents. At first glance, they seemed ordinary, but one sheet made me freeze. It had a date I didn't recognize, a name I didn't recognize, and a number I had never heard my mother mention in my entire life. My fingers trembled slightly as I held it. My heart pounded louder than any alarm in the neighborhood. Something about it screamed that it wasn't just paperwork. It was a message, and it was meant for someone else or meant to be hidden from me. I sat on the floor with my back pressed against the couch, letting the papers spill into my lap like a trail I wasn't sure I wanted to follow. Each document revealed fragments, tiny pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed. Bank statements showing transfers to unknown accounts, postcards from a city I had never visited, letters with names of people I had never met, addressed in my mother's familiar handwriting with tone and care that suggested secrecy rather than love. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, one that tightened with every line I read. At first, I tried to reason it away. Maybe they were old friends. Maybe some forgotten family connections I had never been told about. But the dates didn't make sense. The letters were recent, some as recent as last year. That meant the secrecy wasn't from decades ago. It was happening now. I felt a shiver creep up my spine. This wasn't just a family story I'd never known. This was happening behind my back, in real time. I shoved the papers back into the box, telling myself I had no right to peek. But the urge to understand burned hotter than the guilt of snooping. I knew I had stumbled on something my mother didn't want me to see. Every instinct screamed at me to stop. Yet another part of me, a stubborn, restless part that had never taken no for an answer, kept me there. I decided to check the dates more closely. One document in particular caught my eye, an official-looking letter addressed to my mother from a local attorney dated 2 months ago. I hesitated. My hands hovered over it, as though it might bite. My mother had always been careful about her paperwork, meticulous. If she had left this out, there had to be a reason. I unfolded the letter with trembling fingers and began reading. The letter concerned guardianship of someone, a child. My stomach turned, not in the dramatic, cinematic sense, but in a raw, visceral way that made me realize the quiet tension I had felt all my life in our house suddenly made sense. There had always been an air of half-truths, of corners of our lives left unexplored, of questions I had learned early not to ask. And now the reason became painfully clear. My mother was hiding something monumental, something that could redefine everything I thought I knew about my family. I sat there for what felt like hours, reading, rereading, trying to piece together the meaning behind every word. My mother had arranged legal custody for a child I had never met. The documents were formal, signed by attorneys, notarized, everything proper and legal. But she had kept it secret. Why? The question throbbed in my mind like a pulse. I tried to imagine the scenario. Maybe she had adopted someone quietly. Maybe it was a distant relative she felt she needed to protect. Every thought twisted further and further, none of them landing neatly. The knot in my chest refused to loosen. Something about the way the words were phrased suggested urgency and fear. This wasn't a casual decision made lightly. This was deliberate, calculated, protective, and hidden from me. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was a text from my sister. Mom called. "Are you okay?" I stared at it, my hands shaking. I hadn't told anyone what I had found yet. If she knew I had discovered this, the voicemail would make even more sense. My mind raced. Was that why my mother said not to come back? Was it because she knew I had stumbled on the truth before she was ready? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I went back to the box and pulled out another envelope. Inside was a small stack of photographs. At first, I didn't recognize the child, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Dark eyes, slightly crooked smile. Something about the expression reminded me of my father, something that had been missing in my own reflection all my life. I felt a pang of sadness mixed with confusion. Who was this child, and why hadn't I ever known? The realization hit me slowly, almost painfully. My mother had kept a part of her life and a part of my family completely hidden, not because she didn't trust me, not because she didn't love me, but because she had judged me too fragile to handle it. And now, 2 decades of curiosity, small suspicions, and suppressed questions collided into a single, sharp truth. My mother had chosen secrecy over honesty. I thought back to every argument we had ever had. Every time she told me something wasn't for me to worry about. Every time I had pressed and she had turned away. Every time she had left me standing in the hallway, words dangling in the air between us. All of those moments took on a new weight. They weren't just protective. They were deliberate walls built to keep me from discovering this child, this secret that could change everything. I felt anger bubble up, not the kind that screams or throws things, but the quiet, insistent kind that builds in your chest and makes your teeth clench. How could she have made me live so many years in partial truths? How could she have allowed me to feel safe in a house built on secrets? And yet, underneath the anger, there was another feeling, a cautious understanding. Whatever this secret was, it wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was fear disguised as control. I remembered that day in the garage when I first noticed the misplaced box. How ordinary it had seemed, my mother humming quietly while sweeping dust from the shelves. My curiosity had flared, but I had been polite, careful. I had asked her about the box, about the letters, and for a moment, just a flicker, her face had changed. Not anger, not panic, just fear. Now, it all made sense. The voicemail, the 46 calls, her insistence on distance. She hadn't been angry with me. She had been terrified. Terrified that I would find out before she was ready. Terrified that the revelation might hurt more than help. Terrified that her carefully constructed world might collapse if I intervened before the right time. I sat back, the letters spread around me, the photographs clutched in my hands. I felt a strange mixture of betrayal and empathy. I wanted to yell. I wanted to slam doors and demand answers. But I also wanted to cry quietly, the way I had when I was a little girl, and she would leave for work early, too early for me to say goodbye properly. I decided to leave the letters where I found them, in the box, for now. I couldn't confront her yet, not without knowing what I would say. How could I ask about a child I didn't know existed? How could I demand honesty when the truth was so heavy, so sudden, so undeniable? Later that day, I walked through the neighborhood to clear my mind. The autumn leaves crunched under my shoes, and the cold air bit at my cheeks. Ordinary life pressed against me in sharp contrast to the chaos in my chest. A neighbor waved from her porch. A dog barked. Kids laughed as a soccer ball rolled across the street. Nothing had changed on the surface, and yet everything had changed for me. I thought about my mother again, about her fears, about the careful way she had raised me to notice and obey boundaries, to sense unspoken rules. That skill which I had resented as a child had become a clue now. She had been preparing me without knowing it for moments like this, when one discovery could shatter years of stability. That night, I couldn't sleep. I rearranged the letters. I examined each signature, each date. I tried to construct a timeline, a story that made sense. Each attempt failed. Each theory I formulated opened a dozen more questions. And through it all, the voicemail played in my mind like a loop I couldn't turn off. Don't come back. I realized something. The secret wasn't just hidden from me. It was hidden for a reason I hadn't yet understood. And the truth, whatever it was, would demand more from me than I was ready to give. I didn't know yet how far this secret would reach. I didn't know who would be hurt if I spoke. I didn't know whether I would be allowed back home when it was finally revealed. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I could no longer pretend that everything was normal. I had crossed a line, whether by accident or intuition, and there was no turning back. By the time I finally laid down, the letters stacked carefully in the box, my chest still tight, I understood that the rest of my life might hinge on how I chose to handle this discovery. Not on whether I screamed or begged, not on whether I ran or hid, but on the delicate, terrifying act of moving forward with a truth that had been kept from me, I closed my eyes and tried to imagine what the morning would bring. I imagined my mother calling again, her voice cracking this time. I imagined my sister's questions. I imagined the life of the child hidden in these papers, living in a world I had never known existed. And then, more than fear, I felt resolve. I was going to face this secret. I didn't know how yet, but I knew that hiding from it wasn't an option anymore. I had discovered what I was never supposed to find. And now, there was no going back. The morning after I discovered the box of letters, photographs, and the child my mother had hidden from me, I felt the weight of every choice I had ever made pressing down on my chest. I stayed in bed far longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the paint with my eyes, imagining the secrets stacked neatly behind them in invisible layers. My mind spun around the same questions. Why was this kept from me? How could she expect me to pretend nothing existed? By late morning, I knew I had to leave. Not out of anger, not out of a dramatic impulse, out of exhaustion, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that comes when you finally realize your whole life has been organized around someone else's fears instead of your own reality. I didn't have a plan. I only knew I couldn't stay. I didn't even know where I'd go. But the thought of being in that house, surrounded by whispers and walls built to hide things, made my chest ache like I had been holding my breath for years. I packed a small bag, clothes for a week, toiletries, and my laptop. I left the letters behind, stacked carefully in the box, knowing I couldn't carry that truth yet. My phone stayed on, but I silenced notifications, afraid of the next call from my mother, my sister, anyone. Every ring would feel like a hammer striking the fragile clarity I was trying to preserve. The drive away from my neighborhood felt different from every other departure I had ever taken. Streets that had been comforting now felt constricting, familiar faces suddenly strangers. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles white. I passed the bakery where I used to stop for cinnamon rolls every Sunday. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, yet I couldn't stop or look. My normal routines felt wrong, heavy with the knowledge that something monumental had been kept from me. I drove aimlessly at first, not knowing whether to head north or south, east or west. The landscape blurred as my thoughts ricocheted in the small space of the car. I imagined what it would be like to see that child, to understand why my mother had made the decisions she did. And then I imagined confronting her, demanding answers. My chest tightened with anger and confusion, but then a different feeling crept in, fear. Fear that once I knew the answers, nothing would ever feel safe or familiar again. As the sun dipped lower, I realized I had left the city limits behind. The houses became sparse, the traffic lighter. I stopped at a roadside diner. The fluorescent lights flickered above me as I pushed the door open, the smell of fried food and coffee washing over me. I chose a booth in the corner and ordered a cup of black coffee. I needed it bitter, needed something to anchor me in the reality of my own presence. I stared out the window as cars passed, listening to the low hum of conversations around me. People laughed, argued, made plans. Life continued for everyone else. But for me, the world had shrunk into a single question. What am I supposed to do with this knowledge? I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen, pretending I could distract myself with work, but every line I typed felt hollow. Nothing could fill the emptiness the secret had left behind. Hours passed. I noticed a young mother with a toddler at a nearby table. The little girl's curls bounced as she toddled toward a spilled cup, giggling. I watched them, imagining the child from the letters moving through a life I had never known. My stomach knotted. The realization hit me hard. My mother's decisions weren't just about keeping secrets. They were about protecting a life that had never intersected with mine, until now. The waitress refilled my coffee. I thanked her, but my voice sounded strange to me, quiet, tight, unsure. I felt old in ways that had nothing to do with my age. The weight of unspoken truths presses differently than any physical burden. It bends your spine and settles in your gut. I realized that leaving now wasn't just a physical act. It was emotional, spiritual, even moral. I left the diner before dark. The road ahead was empty except for the occasional truck and the glow of headlights cutting through the growing shadows. My thoughts turned to my sister again. Would she call? Would she beg me to come back? Or would she resent me for leaving without waiting for answers? I didn't know, and the uncertainty was worse than any argument I could imagine having. By the time I reached a small motel on the outskirts of town, night had fully descended. The neon sign flickered above the parking lot, casting erratic light across my car. I parked, my hands still trembling from the long drive. Inside, the room smelled faintly of cleaning products and stale carpet. I set my bag down, locked the door behind me, and slid onto the edge of the bed, letting my body sink into the mattress like it might absorb some of my tension. I tried calling my mother one more time, telling myself that maybe a conversation would bring clarity, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, careful to keep my voice steady. "Mom, it's Scarlett. I don't know what to say. I need time." I ended the call before I could second-guess myself. The silence afterward felt like a vacuum. I stayed awake most of the night, listening to the muffled sounds from the hallway and the occasional passing car. The room was small, claustrophobic, yet it felt like freedom in its own way. For the first time, I could breathe without the oppressive weight of hidden truths pressing down on me. But freedom came with its own kind of loneliness. The next morning, I walked outside, hoping the sunlight might bring clarity. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of pine and wet asphalt. I noticed a man walking his dog, nodding politely as he passed. The world seemed to continue without knowing, without caring about the choices I was making. I found a small bench near the motel and sat there, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup I had bought from the vending machine. I tried to plan my next steps, but each idea seemed inadequate. I had left to gain perspective, to distance myself from the secrecy and tension that had dominated my life. Yet now, sitting alone, I realized that distance doesn't answer questions. Distance only amplifies them. The box of letters and photographs haunted me in my mind. I kept imagining the child, imagining the eyes, the smile, the life I had never touched. Each vision brought a mix of guilt and curiosity. What right did I have to know this story? What responsibility did I carry now that the secret was in my possession, even if only in memory? A knock at the motel door startled me. I looked through the peephole to see a man in a uniform. He said he was checking on a maintenance issue. Relief flooded me in waves. The intrusion was minor, ordinary, a reminder that life goes on even in extraordinary times. But even this simple interaction reminded me that the world outside my head kept spinning while I wrestled with what I had found. I spent the day walking along the edges of town, through empty streets and small parks. Every corner seemed to whisper secrets of its own. Children's laughter in the distance, a lawn mower humming across a yard, the smell of freshly cut grass. It all felt alive and ordinary, yet to me, it was underscored with tension. I could almost hear my mother's voice echoing through these mundane scenes. "Don't come back." When I returned to the motel that evening, I realized something else. Leaving had brought clarity, yes, but also vulnerability. I had escaped the immediate pressures of family, but I had also opened myself to isolation. I didn't have answers. I didn't have control. I had walked away from the life I knew, from the people who shaped it, without understanding the full cost of that choice. I tried to sleep again, but the images of the secret child and the hidden letters replayed relentlessly. I imagined my mother pacing in the house, realizing that I had discovered the truth and had left anyway. The voicemail, the silence, the 46 calls I didn't know would come yet, they all felt like shadows pressing against me in the dark. In the middle of the night, I wrote in my journal. Words spilled out faster than my mind could process them. Anger, confusion, fear, longing, regret. I wrote about my mother, my sister, the unknown child, the life that had been kept from me. I wrote about myself, the person who had always followed the rules, always waited for explanations, always trusted that family boundaries were sacred. And I wrote about the realization that sometimes stepping away is the only way to see clearly. By the early hours of the morning, I understood that walking away didn't solve anything. It didn't erase the secret. It didn't protect me or my family. All it did was create space for reflection, for recognition, for the first moment I could breathe and think about my own needs without being pressed by hidden truths. I watched the sunrise from the small window of my motel room. Orange light spilled across the room, turning the peeling wallpaper gold. For a moment, I allowed myself a quiet smile. I had survived the drive, the departure, the solitude. I had faced the immediate shock of the secret and made a choice. I didn't know what the cost would be. I didn't know what my mother would think. I didn't know if I could ever return. But I knew this. I had claimed my own space, my own breath, my own perspective, and that was the first step in understanding what had been hidden for so long. I had drifted into a restless sleep, curled on the edge of the motel bed, the rising sun still hours away. The faint hum of the air conditioner and distant sounds of cars on the highway were my only company. I thought I could rest, let the isolation and distance give me a reprieve from the chaos I had stumbled into. But even in sleep, my mind refused to quiet. The letters, the photographs, the secret that my mother had hidden from me, every fragment replayed relentlessly. When I finally woke, it was to a sharp, insistent vibration from my bag on the floor. I rolled over, disoriented, and grabbed my phone. My heart skipped a beat. The screen was a frantic collage of missed calls, 46 of them, all from home, all within the span of one night. My chest constricted as I stared at the numbers, trying to make sense of the sheer volume. 46 calls, 46 moments when someone had tried and failed to reach me. I tapped the phone, opened slowly, my fingers trembling. The first call was from my mother, time-stamped at 3:12 a.m. I could almost hear her panic in the silence of that hour. The voicemail button glowed red, signaling that she had left messages. I pressed play hesitantly, bracing myself. "Scarlett, please just pick up. I don't know what's happening. Just come back." Her voice cracked somewhere between fear and desperation. It was nothing like the cold, measured tone of the previous voicemail. This was raw, vulnerable, terrified. Another message followed, shorter, more frantic. "Please call anyone, just come home." Then another, each building on the one before. Her tone oscillated between panic, pleading, and quiet sobs. My chest tightened. I sat on the edge of the bed, unable to move, unable to speak. I hadn't realized until that moment how profoundly my mother's fear could reach me even from a distance. The calls from my sister were scattered among them, each message carrying a different emotion. One sounded resigned. "I don't know if you'll answer, but we need you." Another was hurried, almost accusing. "Scarlett, this isn't the time for games. Come back." Then came a voice message from a number I didn't recognize, my mother's neighbor, perhaps, simply stating, "We're worried. Please check in." Even the air of caution, The quiet panic in strangers' voices landed heavily in my chest. I sank deeper into the mattress, phone still clutched in my hand. My thoughts raced. What had happened while I slept? Was the child safe? Had someone gotten hurt? I hadn't known I'd become untethered to the world I'd left behind. 46 calls. 46 attempts to pull me back into a reality I had fled, and yet I was paralyzed, caught between fear, anger, and guilt. I replayed the first voicemail again. My mother's words, "Don't come back," suddenly collided with the frantic pleas of the second. It didn't make sense. How could someone shift so drastically in such a short time? I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, letting my forehead rest against my hands. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in the silence. Something significant had happened. I could feel it deep in my bones. Then the thought struck me, maybe this had nothing to do with me. Maybe my departure had triggered something I had never anticipated. I pictured my mother pacing in the living room, phone in hand, each unanswered call feeding the growing anxiety that I was gone for good. And then the child, the hidden child whose existence I had only just learned about, who could be in danger without anyone's knowledge. My throat tightened, and I realized that my distance had unknowingly created a vacuum of panic and uncertainty. I gathered my courage and started calling back. The first call went to my mother. The line clicked, and she answered with barely a whisper. "Scarlett, please." Her voice cracked again, and I felt tears rise unbidden. I struggled for words. "Mom, what happened?" I managed. There was a long pause. "It's everything. I didn't know you'd find out. I didn't mean to scare you. You weren't supposed to see any of it. I thought maybe if you stayed away, it would be easier." Her words tumbled out, jagged and disjointed. She was pleading and explaining simultaneously, as if she couldn't believe I was on the line after all this. I swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to," I began, but she cut me off. "No, listen. It's all gone wrong, and we need you here. Please. I don't know what else to do." I hung up and stared at the phone. Every part of me wanted to drive straight back, but another part of me resisted. What was happening back home? Why did 46 missed calls accumulate overnight without me knowing the cause? My mind spiraled through scenarios. Was the child sick? Had there been an accident? Or was it my mother's fear amplifying everything into a storm? I grabbed my laptop and tried messaging my sister, fingers shaking. "What's going on? Why all the calls?" The response came almost immediately. "Mom, she's scared. Something happened last night. I don't know all the details. Please just come home." Then, "She's been calling everyone. I don't know what she'll do if you don't come." I sank back into the chair, gripping my mug of coffee I had poured hours ago but never sipped. My hands were trembling. The stakes were higher than I could process. The secret I had uncovered was no longer abstract. It was alive, active, and somehow endangered, or at least had triggered a chain of panic that I had to respond to. I paced the small motel room. Each step felt heavier than the last. I imagined the living room at home, the couch where my mother had sat, clutching her phone, tears streaming down her face, waiting for a call that never came. I imagined the child, perhaps asleep, safe, but unaware that the world had shifted around them in one night. And I imagined myself, isolated by miles, unable to intervene in the chaos I had unintentionally unleashed. Finally, I decided to pack my things again. Not out of certainty, but out of necessity. I needed to see for myself, to understand what had gone so wrong, and to confront whatever storm my absence had created. As I loaded my bag into the car, the phone vibrated again. Another voicemail. My mother's voice, desperate, pleading, fragmented. "Please, please don't make this worse. Just come back. Please. We need you." I can't do this alone. I started the engine with a trembling hand. Every mile closer to home filled me with dread. I didn't know what I would find. I didn't know what the 46 calls represented, but I couldn't stay away any longer. The tension coiled tighter with each passing mile, a rope pulling me forward toward answers, confrontation, and perhaps reconciliation. As I approached the familiar streets of my neighborhood, I saw the lights of my house through the early morning fog. Something felt different, not the house itself, but the aura of it, an almost tangible anxiety lingering in the air. My mother's car was gone. My sister's truck was parked crookedly in the driveway, suggesting haste. I parked cautiously, almost holding my breath. I hadn't realized I was shaking until I pressed the button to unlock the door. My hand lingered, hovering over the handle. Another call had come through during my drive, but I ignored it. I didn't need to hear more fragmented panic. I needed to see, to understand, to face the consequences of my absence head-on. The front door creaked as I opened it, and I stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning products, but beneath it I could detect tension. Every room I passed seemed charged. The living room lights were on, and I could see the phone, still buzzing with notifications, on the table. I didn't touch it yet. I just stood there, absorbing the quiet chaos that had unfolded in my absence. A shadow moved behind the kitchen doorway. My sister appeared, eyes wide, her mouth opening to say something, but closing again. I could see the relief and the frustration fighting for dominance on her face. "Scarlett," she whispered finally, a simple greeting carrying the weight of hours, days, maybe even years of unspoken fear. I nodded, unable to speak. My mother appeared behind her, pale, eyes glistening, shoulders hunched. The desperation I had heard in the voicemail earlier was visible now, unfiltered and raw. She didn't say, "I told you not to come back." She didn't argue or demand an explanation. She just looked at me, the weight of 46 missed calls and an entire night of fear laid bare in her expression. I felt the magnitude of what I had walked away from. I hadn't known the cost. I had thought leaving was simple, a retreat for clarity, but the cost had been measured in fear, in desperation, in the sheer weight of uncertainty I had left behind. And now, standing there, I understood that distance could magnify everything. Absence could distort love into panic, and secrecy, no matter how well-intended, could trigger chaos I had never imagined. I sank onto the couch, my mother beside me, my sister hovering near. For the first time in hours, maybe days, I felt the pulse of life returning, chaotic, imperfect, human. The 46 missed calls were not just numbers on a screen. They were a reflection of love tangled with fear, trust entangled with secrecy, and the heavy, impossible work of trying to protect everyone while keeping hidden truths from unraveling completely. The weight of the 46 missed calls still lingered in the air, pressing on my chest like a tangible presence. I could feel it in every movement, the stiffness in my shoulders, the tremor in my hands, the way my heart had learned to beat unevenly in response to a single ring. My mother's presence beside me was both a comfort and a warning. She wanted forgiveness, reassurance, an answer that I didn't yet have. I couldn't offer blind trust, not after what I had uncovered, not after walking away and seeing the chaos my absence had triggered. I stood slowly, careful not to startle either of them. "I need to see the papers," I said quietly, voice steady despite the thrum of emotion in my chest. My mother flinched slightly, her eyes darting away for a moment. "Now," she asked, barely audible. Her tone was cautious, defensive, as if this request carried a danger she couldn't yet measure. "Yes," I said firmly. "Everything. I need to understand it myself this time." She hesitated, a hand lingering near her mouth, Before finally nodding, my sister moved aside, and my mother led me to the study where the box had been kept. The room smelled faintly of old paper and dust, but also of home, the kind of smell that carried memories both comforting and painful. She placed the box on the desk, hands trembling. I opened it carefully, as I had at the motel, but this time the fear was different. It wasn't about the unknown anymore. It was about the reckoning, the confrontation of truth and trust. Each document, each letter, each photograph was a thread connecting the past to the present. I picked up the letters first, examining the careful handwriting, the tone of secrecy mixed with affection. I recognized now that these were not lies. They were acts of protection. But protection doesn't absolve deception. Not completely. My mother watched me silently, her lips pressed together, jaw tight. I could see the anxiety in her posture, the way she kept one hand resting on the desk, as if holding herself together, physically, so her emotions wouldn't spill over. I understood her fear. I understood why she had sent the voicemail that had driven me away. But understanding did not erase my anger. It did not erase the feeling that I had been kept from something monumental, something that had a right to exist in my life long before I discovered it by accident. I had to keep it from you, she said finally, voice low. I thought it would hurt you to know that you'd blame me or feel responsible. Her eyes brimmed with tears. I wanted to protect you, all of you. I set the first stack of letters aside, my fingers still trembling. Protect me from what? I asked softly, but with a sharp edge beneath the surface. From the truth, from reality, you've built a world for me that isn't real, and I had to leave to see that. She flinched but didn't speak. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, a physical thing I could almost reach out and touch. My sister stepped closer, placing a tentative hand on my shoulder, an anchor between past and present, between fear and reconciliation. I need to know the timeline, I said. Everything from the beginning. Why this child was hidden, why the letters, why the secrecy. My mother nodded, taking a deep breath, steadying herself. 2 years ago, I found out about a relative who was unable to care for their child. I couldn't let them be alone. I made a decision to step in quietly. No fanfare, no announcements. I thought I could manage it alone, keep you safe from the complications. I didn't anticipate that you'd find out like this. I sat down, letting her words sink. The anger I had felt earlier simmered into a cautious understanding. She had not lied out of malice. She had acted in fear, in love, in desperation. But the secrecy had consequences. 46 missed calls, sleepless nights, panic, distrust. I had walked away to protect myself, and in doing so, had exposed the fragility of her world and mine. Why not tell me sooner? I asked quietly. Why keep me in the dark until it exploded? I thought I could control it, she admitted, her voice breaking. I thought I could manage the risks. I didn't know. I didn't realize how much weight secrecy would carry. And then last night, the voicemail. I lost control. I was scared you'd come back before I was ready, before I could make it safe for you. I nodded slowly, the pieces aligning in my mind. Her fear had dictated everything. The cold distance, the messages, the secrecy, all were expressions of protection gone awry. But protection is not trust. And I realized now that returning without clarity, without boundaries, without my eyes open, would be a mistake. I'm back, I said finally, voice firmer than I expected. But I'm back on my terms. Not blind. Not pretending everything is okay. I need honesty, all of it, or I can't stay. She looked at me, searching my face as if to determine whether I could be trusted with the truth. I can give you that, she said after a pause. Everything. but it's messy, it's complicated, and it won't make sense at first. I just, I don't want to lose you in the process. I won't be lost, I replied, but I need space to understand. I need the facts, the timelines, everything laid bare. No more shadows. Over the next hours, my mother walked me through every detail. I listened, asked questions, challenged inconsistencies, and refused to accept vague reassurances. She described the child's circumstances, the urgency that had driven her actions, the careful steps she had taken to protect both the child and the family. She explained how she had juggled her own responsibilities while trying to shield me from complications, how she had believed ignorance would safeguard my peace. The more she spoke, the more I understood. Yet each revelation also reminded me of the fragility of trust, how easily it can fracture when decisions are made in secrecy, even for the right reasons. I realized that returning home didn't automatically repair everything. Returning was just the first step. The hard part, building trust again, navigating love without illusions, was only beginning. By afternoon, we were sifting through photographs together. I looked at the child, small and smiling in images I had never seen. My mother pointed out milestones. First steps, first birthday, moments she had captured quietly, fearing celebration would invite scrutiny or exposure. I felt a strange mix of awe and sorrow. I hadn't been there. And yet the child existed in the world we shared. The weight of absence pressed on me once more. My sister, quietly observing, began to share her perspective as well. She admitted that she had been caught between loyalty to our mother and loyalty to me, unsure whether to tell me what she knew or protect both of us by staying silent. Her honesty added another layer to the narrative. I realized that trust wasn't a single line. It was a web delicate and complex, involving all of us. When evening fell, the atmosphere had shifted, though tension remained. We had talked, argued, laughed in moments of relief, and shared silences heavy with reflection. I understood now that coming back did not mean erasing the past or pretending I had no questions. It meant showing up with open eyes, prepared to navigate the messiness of life with honesty and courage. I stepped outside later, letting the cool night air wash over me. The street was quiet, the sky a deep indigo, the distant hum of the city muted. I felt a strange sense of calm, tempered with awareness. I wasn't fully reconciled, not yet, but I was present, willing to face what had been hidden, willing to rebuild, willing to see with clarity rather than naivety. Inside, my mother prepared tea, moving quietly. I watched her, thinking about all the times she had acted out of fear, out of love, out of desperation. The 46 missed calls, the voicemails, the secrecy, they were part of a larger story, one that didn't have a perfect ending yet. But it was real, and it needed acknowledgement. I sat with her at the kitchen table, sipping the tea she poured with careful hands. The warmth seeped through me, and I realized something fundamental. Trust is not given blindly. Trust is earned, nurtured, and continuously tested. My return wasn't an act of forgiveness alone. It was a commitment to witness the truth, to engage with it fully, to hold both love and skepticism in the same space. As the night deepened, I thought about the child, about my sister, about the family I had temporarily left behind. I felt a mixture of sorrow, gratitude, and resolve. Sorrow for the distance my actions had caused. Gratitude for the raw honesty that had emerged from our conversations. Resolve to remain vigilant, compassionate, and engaged, even as the journey of rebuilding trust stretched ahead. I realized then that coming back with open eyes was a choice, not a guarantee. It was about acknowledging the fragility of relationships, the consequences of secrecy, and the resilience of human bonds when confronted with truth. I could not undo the past, but I could navigate the present with clarity and courage. By the time I finally went to bed that night, the house felt different. Not perfect, not resolved, but alive with possibility. My mother had gone to her room. My sister had returned to hers. I lay in my own bed, eyes open to the ceiling, reflecting on the lessons of the past 48 hours. I had come back, not blind, not passive, not naive. I had returned with open eyes, ready to confront what was hidden, to bear the weight of truth, and to rebuild trust on my terms. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I belonged, fully, consciously, and with the knowledge that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, but only with courage, patience, and unwavering honesty. The morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, touching every corner of the room with a quiet warmth that felt almost like forgiveness. I sat on the edge of my bed, the events of the past days pressing on me with a weight that was both heavy and strangely liberating. I thought about the voicemail, the 46 missed calls, the letters, the photographs, the secrets that had once loomed over my life like a storm cloud, threatening to tear everything apart. And yet, now that the chaos had passed, I understood something vital. Life isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to stand in the rain and not be swept away. I had walked away, yes, and in doing so, I had felt the sharp sting of fear, isolation, and guilt, but I had also discovered my own strength. I had learned that distance can give clarity, that stepping back doesn't mean abandoning, and that the truths we uncover, even the ones we never expected, can be met with courage rather than despair. I thought of my mother, sitting quietly in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, the lines of worry still etched in her face, but softened now by the fragile calm that had settled between us. Her secrecy had hurt me, yes, but it had also been an act of love, flawed though it was. She had acted out of fear, out of protection, out of hope that she could shield me from the weight of things I wasn't ready to bear. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her, not completely. I felt empathy, understanding, and the recognition that even those we love most can make choices we don't understand, choices that are messy, human, and imperfect. I realized that forgiveness isn't always about saying the words. Sometimes it's about seeing someone fully, acknowledging their flaws, and choosing to stay present anyway. And then there was my sister, whose quiet strength had held us both in ways I had only just begun to notice. She had navigated the chaos with a delicate balance of loyalty, fear, and honesty, and her presence reminded me that family isn't only blood, it's resilience, compassion, and the willingness to confront discomfort together. I felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. The secret child, once a symbol of hidden truths and fractured trust, had become a bridge, a reminder that even the most challenging circumstances can create opportunities for connection, understanding, and care. As I rose to stretch, the sunlight warming my skin, I made a silent promise to myself. I would carry this experience not as a burden, but as a lesson. I would approach life with open eyes, questioning, aware, but not cynical. I would rebuild trust where it had faltered, not blindly, but intentionally, with honesty guiding each step. And I would remember that love is rarely simple, that truth can be both painful and healing, and that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. For the first time in a long while, I felt whole, not because the past had changed, but because I had. I had returned not as a passive observer or a frightened child, but as someone who had faced secrets, confronted betrayal, and chosen presence over avoidance. The world outside continued, ordinary and bustling, unaware of the storms that had raged behind our walls. And yet, inside me, a quiet strength had settled, a resilience born from pain, clarity born from distance, and hope born from the understanding that no secret, no fear, and no act of protection, however flawed, could ever diminish the bonds of family if we chose to meet them with honesty, courage, and open hearts. In that moment, I understood the ultimate truth. Coming back isn't about erasing the past, nor is it about pretending everything is perfect. It's about returning fully aware, awake, and willing to face the world, the people you love, and yourself without illusions. And for the first time, I felt ready to do exactly that.